Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Parvez Khan. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Kuhat University of Science and Technology. The subject is National and International Affairs. The course code is JMC 341. It's our lecture number 13. So before we start our session, we'll be talking about the objectives of this class first, the session first, and it is that students will be able to understand Pakistan's relationship with Afghanistan in a historical context. They will be able to develop a geostrategic understanding of Pakistan's relation with its neighboring Afghanistan. They will be discussing it in geostrategic terms, and they'll be able to understand the dynamics of relationship with Afghanistan in post-Cold War era and post 9/11, how circumstances changed. These were the significant 2 years, how it affected the relationship between the two countries. So as we can see the map, Pakistan shares the largest uh, western border with Afghanistan, and it's pretty evident that when you have such a large border, it influences your politics, it influences your relationship, whether there's stability is going to affect you, if there's instability that's going to affect you. So Pakistan shares its larger border with Afghanistan, and that means that it's an important neighbor, and there are quite similarities. And let's talk about the post-independence relations that both countries are Muslim countries, but the relationship have been strained from the early days since independence of Pakistan in 1947. The main issue was Durand Line, which we're going to discuss in detail a bit after this. There's a border dispute between the two countries, and then the period was marked by the efforts of the Afghan authorities to get Pakistan to abandon the border along with the Durand Line and the ownership of the eastern Pashtun territories that are in Pakistan. So they later claimed that the eastern territories of Pashtun areas, because Pashtuns ethnic group were living in both Afghanistan and Pakistan, and they have been divided by the Durand Line. So this was a claim to it, and that created a lot of rift in the early days of the politics between Afghanistan and Pakistan. But already in its initial period, Afghanistan's dependence on Pakistan was being formed through the supply of goods to the port of Karachi. So yes, since Afghanistan is a landlocked country, so they had to depend on Pakistan's seaport, which is in Karachi. So yes, sometimes the relationship will be strained, but sometimes again there will be ease and there will be friendship. But overall, in general, there have been mistrust over the years. So let's talk about early days. In 1952, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and in Afghanistan, not only laid claim to Pashtun territories but also to Balochistan province, which further affected the situation. And it was because of this that the diplomatic relations were cut off in 1961 and 63. So it's the Durand line. Majorly, the major problem, the early problem between the two countries was the borderline, the dispute, which was basically Durand Line is basically it was established after the 1893 Durand Line agreement between Mortimer Durand of colonial British India and Amir Abdur Rahman Khan of Afghanistan for fixing the limit of their respective sphere of influence. Like the both areas were divided, Afghanistan and both British India and Afghanistan wanted to have their own spheres of influence, and obviously the Soviet influence was also increasing, so British was looking to a buffer zone, and this is why there's a lot of political influence. And the frontier line between Afghanistan and what was then British Empire is commonly known as Durand Line. This is where the differences started, but it all started from the days of British Empire, its colonial legacy, and after Pakistan got independence, this was the major issue between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now let's talk about ideological warfare. It's not just that the wars begin in vacuum. There's a lot of ideology behind the wars. There's a lot of circumstances. There are a lot of political issues. There can be a number of things, but ideology plays a key role when there's difference of opinion, and that can lead to severe crisis between the two countries or individuals. So let's talk about the ideology. Afghanistan in its early days had its tendency towards Soviet Union. Obviously, it was influenced by it, and Pakistan had its tilt towards America. So this made Afghanistan part of Cold War between Soviet Union and America, and it was basically an ideological difference between communism and capitalism, which Pakistan had its tilt towards capitalistic American politics, whereas Afghanistan was looking forward to the communist state of Soviet Russia, which obviously it played a key role in the future relationship, and that's how it went. So Muhammad Daud Khan became president with the Soviet support, and it escalated the tensions between two countries in the time which is like 1976, and that's how the tensions increased between the two countries. And it all changed when the Soviet invaded Afghanistan in 1979. It marked a new turn in geopolitical circumstances. Political circumstances changed. There began a new war of alliances, and new politics came into existence, and all the plannings were done that how to counter Russian Soviet influence, how they can be controlled because they are advancing. And one of the things which is said about communism is that it doesn't stop; it expands. And Pakistan, when it was looking at it, the threat, and similarly the world power like America, which was already having its Cold War with the Soviet Russian Empire, they took it as an opportunity to counter Soviet influence in the region. And that once again made Afghanistan one of the important places where superpowers came, and they invested a lot. A lot of politics and diplomacy was done, and strategically, this place once again became so important. So, Afghanistan, since 1979, witnessed decades of war. Uh, like even till date, we can see that there are foreign troops there. In 1979, the Soviet Russian invaded Afghanistan, and uh, but after that, after 2001, the American troops invaded Afghanistan. So it has always caught attention of international powers because of its geostrategic location. And the U.S.-Soviet proxy war was fought with repercussions on the both sides of the border. It's very important to understand that the repercussions were on both sides of the border, and a lot of civilian lives were lost, and a lot of infrastructural damages took place during this time. Mujahideen were funded and trained to to fight the Soviet troops, and this place became a battleground, and lots of powers got involved. A lot of the place became a battleground. Obviously, it affected how the civilian lives, and that began the crisis for refugee crisis began, forcing Afghan families to take shelter in Peshawar and other Pakhtunkhwa regions. More than 3 million people. It's believed that, according to UN, they shifted and they migrated to flee the war-torn Afghanistan. So this explains the intensity of the war that was taking place, particularly from 1979 till 1989. It was a serious battle between the Soviet troops and the Afghan Mujahideen for a long time. Uh, Soviet withdrawal in 1989, after a decade, obviously the empire couldn't handle. The Soviet empire broke out, it finished, the states broke out, and they could not handle it anymore. So in 1989, it brought a little change in political landscape for Afghanistan. Because although the troops went out, but little did change because Afghanistan soon started the battle for power within. The groups started fighting for power, and there were many different groups. There were warlords, and once again, there is a lot of political instability in the region that again costed a number of lives in the region. And one of the examples is Northern Alliance versus Taliban. They were fighting for supremacy in the region, that for the control of Kabul. And similarly, the U.S. role is also important because when it was rebuilding time, particularly when it was time to build schools and hospitals and infrastructure, the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan. And to understand further how particularly politics played its role and how the covert wars and the proxy wars took place, there's a very good book, Ghost Wars, which is very, very relevant to the Afghan story of how it all started. And similarly, there's another film, Charlie Wilson War, which also give you an idea that how it all started, how the funds were generated, and in the end, how they just left without rebuilding and the infrastructure, the support that was needed, and that vacuum that was created in the 10 years, how it led to further deterioration and the serious consequences after 9/11. So this all explains that how much happened in Afghanistan, and particularly when there's war, little effort was played to the rebuilding, which otherwise might have prevented a lot of problems and troubles for the local civilians. Similarly, another issue is for a point of concern for Pakistan was the Indian influence. A lot of number of consulates were being built. There's a lot of Indian influence in the region after 9/11 particularly, but there was Indian influence even back then. So Pakistan had been concerned about Afghanistan's relationship with India, which it thought that initially Afghanistan had its tilt towards India, which could cause harm to Pakistan's foreign policy and its regional stability. So that was Pakistan's concern for a very long time. But it all changed after the 9/11, the global context. We have to look into it that when US invaded Afghanistan in 2001 after 9/11. Pakistan became a frontline ally in the war against terror, and how Pervez Musharraf's U-turn against the strategic assets changed political and regional support. It escalated militancy in the northwestern tribal regions of Pakistan and in the border regions of Afghanistan, and bringing serious consequences and the loss of civilian lives on both sides of the border. And that's an important concern because 9/11 changed everything that's related to this year for nearly 20 years, and particularly from 2001 till 2010. It was an extreme militancy that was witnessed on the cross-border areas. And similarly, it's important to mention that Pakistan lies at the intersection of big powers, rivalry, and politics, which means that the loss of lives on both sides of the border were there. It was witnessed, as we've just discussed, and the battle for control outside Kabul and many areas are still controlled by Taliban groups. So there's a big concern when it comes to post 9/11 circumstances and how it's going and how it's going to be dealt. And similarly, we're going to talk about the post 9/11 Afghanistan leadership. Is that Hamid Karzai government from 2001 to 2014 and Ashraf Ghani's government from 2014 and the present have remained unsuccessful in effectively tackling the fundamental challenges of insecurities of Afghanistan. So it's very important to look into this. That yes, there have been challenges, and even now there are particular challenges when it comes to control in Afghanistan, because outside Kabul there are still many regions which are controlled by warlords and the militants or the Taliban, and Pakistan has a key role to play in bringing regional stability. So that's what they're looking forward to, and United States is looking forward to withdrawing its forces, and it looks forward to Pakistan to play its key role in negotiations and peace building in Afghanistan. So, what are the key points for future? Both countries will look forward to handle the mistrust that exists. The mistrust is there from the first day, starting from the border issue, then ideological war between communism and capitalism, and then after the 9/11, how circumstances change. So yes, there's a lot of mistrust between the two countries, and both countries will be looking forward to that, to how to handle the mistrust. Afghanistan wants Pakistan to stop interfering in its domestic policies and politics, and Pakistan wants a stable Afghanistan with pro-Pakistan government because it's looking at the very large border. It doesn't have a very cordial relationship with the eastern border with India, so that's why they're looking forward to the western border of Afghanistan to be stable with having pro-Pakistan government. These are some of the concerns, and that's why Pakistan wants a cordial relationship with Afghanistan, which can have at least one border can be secured in this way. And both countries will be looking forward to rebuilding after severe loss of lives and infrastructure in the last 20 years. So this is what both countries will be looking forward to. And recently there have been a lot of talks, there have been lots of agreements, and both countries will have to come to a certain point where they can talk about development, progress, trade, and this is what the both countries are looking forward to. So it's a complex topic. We'll be talking more about this. We may even have a live discussion session on someday about this session, because it's important to understand relationship with the neighboring Afghanistan. Geostrategic location is very important in this context. It's very important to understand the relationship with China and Afghanistan because it's shaping our future context. So we'll be talking more about it. I hope that you enjoyed the session. These are some of the references which you can use and study. We'll be in touch. So these are it. And some of the questions that you can think about is that what are the ways Pakistan and Afghanistan can look for cordial relationship in future? How important is the role of Pakistan in negotiations and peace building with Taliban, and how we can go on about it because Pakistan shares largest border with Afghanistan. How important is it to focus on trade and friendship between the two countries? So these are some of the questions you can think about, and we'll be talking more about it. I hope you enjoyed the session. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much for joining today.